Good day, everyone. Miss Marmy and I were assigned to discuss the components of the K-12 English curriculum. But before that, let's have the objectives of this lesson. After learning these components, we will be able to first enumerate the components of this curriculum. What are those components? Next, explain how each of these components to the overall framework and analyze each of the components implemented in the curriculum. Now, let us have another look at the framework of the K-12 English curriculum. The K-12 English curriculum describes the major elements that contribute to the learning of a language. It defines how these elements work together to ensure that the curriculum attain its goal. Then, what is the goal of this curriculum? This curriculum has four components, namely language learning process, effective language use, making meaning through language, and holistic assessment. As you notice at the center of the framework, what do you see? There is a making meaning through language. What do you think by making meaning in the center or the core of the framework? Any idea? Okay, that is because making meaning through language highlights the main goal of the curriculum, which is to help the learners acquire a highly developed literacy skills that enable them to understand that the English language is the most widely used medium of communication. Now, let's go back to the framework. Look at the skills that surround the core of the framework. What are those skills? These are the macro skills that promote the same outcome, which is thinking. And the application of these macro skills focuses on these three elements of effective language use that can be found in the inner core of the framework, which are understanding culture, understanding language, and process and strategies. The use of language in this area describes the language learners how the language learners could demonstrate their skills. The learners could understand the culture through the literature and communication of that certain place or community. When they understand their culture, allows them to give the right meaning to each word in the larger context. That is where they develop their ability to use language appropriately, the social linguistic skill, which is one of the main focus of the curriculum. For instance, you are having a vacation to a place that is new to you. Siyempre, you don't know their native language. And then, an elder asked you to get something for them. Jari, for example, pagkamang ng aton, or they may ask you, pagkamang ng tubig kay ihidlaw kami. Because you didn't know what that words meant, you don't move a thing. And the elders will understand, or you might ask them what those words meant. After learning these words, you will now understand what you want. That the word pagkamang is pagguha, aton is kalayo, and ihidlaw means giuhaw. And that's learning and understanding culture. Now, you understand their culture. You now understand their culture. It's time for you to understand their language. How those words are formed, the structure of sentences, and how useful the simple nuances are accompanied by gestures for you to understand what is meant by the language used. For instance, by pointing to something, you can understand that thing is what it meant. When we recognize and understand the rules and patterns of language, it helps us express our thoughts and feelings towards that person or situation. And by learning another language also, we can understand ideas and thoughts that may differ from our culture. Now, as we are exposed to different opportunities to use language, we can get several processes and strategies for us to adapt to situations depending on audience and purpose. We may be able to solve problems and adjust difficulties. And if we want answers, we can ask questions, read books, and even we can search the internet to find answers. Engaging in discussions and brainstormings with others through conversations or ways of developing ideas or using technologies like chatting and SMS. And after getting that information or data, we use strategies in validating the information to assess if this idea is useful. And then we synthesize and present it through organizers, charts, and even in essays. Those are the elements of language use. We proceed to the outer core of the framework. These are the approaches under the language learning process that a teacher must understand for them to teach language to young learners. And these approaches are spiral progression, interaction, integration, learner-centeredness, contextualization, and construction. Spiral progression is based on the work of Jerome Brunier on the spiral curriculum, following the hypothesis that even complex topics can be taught to learner at any stage of development when structures are presented in an organized manner. This is spiral curriculum has three characteristics. First, the student revisits a topic several times throughout the school career, and with each revisits, the students learn more about a subject each time the topic is reviewed or encountered. Second, the complexity of the topic increases with each revisit. And each time the student encounters the topic, it expands their knowledge or improves their skill level. And lastly, new learning has a relationship with old learning. It means that new knowledge has connection with the previous one. It is from simple to complex learning. And and this is the image of a spiral curriculum. And it has three stages of representation or theories. The enactive representation, that refers to an action or something you touch. Next is iconic. It refers to images. This is where the learners draws what they played, touched, or saw. And the last stage is symbolic. It refers to language wherein the learner looks for abstract reasoning. In this image, for instance, in an active, the baby learns through movement or action, and he just plays with a book. He does not know what's in the book. And in iconic, they look at the pictures and learn through images or icons. And symbolic, they read for research and learn through abstract symbols. Another example is in this image, the children are playing at the beach and they build something. That's in the inactive stage. Next, he draws what he builds, which is in the iconic stage. And the last one, he explains what he had drawn. That is in the symbolic stage. Uh, using this spiral curriculum or using these stages of representation, the learners may learn the learners may learn easily because they the information that they saw or that they learned has been retained, or there has been a retention from the previous learnings. And the goal of this approach or this spiral approach is to expose the learner to a wide variety of concepts and disciplines until mastered by studying it over and over again, but with a different deepening of complexity. Um, the second approach is interaction. In this approach, you allow your student to interact during the learning process, like having a question and answer, or doing the report, question and answer, doing the reporting, or even involving them in a debate. By doing this, their communicative skills enhances as well as their socialization skills. And integrating language lessons into play or musicals, for instance, will also help learners create meaning. Not only do they improve their another skill, but also their social linguistic skill. And that's an integration approach. Mm. You are going to integrate the linguistic skill of your students into another skills that they may have. So by doing this, the another skill that they have will will enhances or improves as well as their social linguistic skills. Next is the learner centeredness. Because the curriculum focuses on the learner, the learning should be based on the learner's needs, skills, abilities, and interests. Therefore, the teacher should use differentiated instructions to meet the learner's needs. In this approach, the teacher uses differentiated instructions because each learners have different skills and abilities. Therefore, the learning also is different. Each learners has its own skills and abilities, and they have different levels of skills and abilities. So the teacher should use a differentiated instructions for that. And next approach is the contextualization. In contextualization, the teacher should design the activities in appropriate context for the learning to be more effective, because context makes learners think about language that suit to the audience, situations, culture, or purpose. In this approach, though they do the activities, tasks, or are appropriate to the learning content, 'di ba nagkarambola yung mga aktibidad na ginagawa ng yung mga na pinapagawa mo sa iyong estudyante dun sa iyong tinuturo. Dapat magkapareho, or kung ano yung itinuturo mo, ganun din yung mga aktibidad na kumbaga related yung aktibidad na ibibigay mo sa iyong mga estudyante. Next, the last approach is the construction, because the core of the curriculum is making meaning. That means the learning tasks and activities in language lessons should be designed around self-reflection, critical thinking, and creating on ideas. As teachers, we need to understand these components for us to become efficient in instilling skills in our learners, and we can finally make meaning through language. This is where my topic ends. I hope you understand and learn something from it. To check your understanding, let's have a recap. Okay, what are the different components of the K-12 English curriculum? There are 4 components in the English curriculum, K-12 English curriculum. These are language learning process, effective language use, making meaning through language, and the last one is the holistic assessment. And what is the goal of this curriculum? That is to help learners acquire highly developed literacy skills and enable them to understand that English language is the most widely used medium of communication. And what are the approaches that a teacher should use for them to teach language to their students? There are 6 approaches. Those are spiral progression, interaction, integration, learner-centeredness, constructions, and constructions. Okay, that would be all. Thank you. And the 2 remaining components will be discussed by Miss Marmy Coral.
Okay, so the next component of the K-12 English curriculum is making meaning through language. As what we have learned in the previous discussion that language is the major tool for communication, teachers should ensure that activities to be presented to the learners should engage them to use language in a varied purposes and topics. Meaning to say, as a teacher or we as a future teacher, we should ensure that the activities to be presented to the learners is creative, strategic, and applicable to the learners that will enhance and sharpen their academic abilities and capabilities. 5 substrands of the curriculum is listening, reading, speaking, writing, and viewing. With the use of these 5 substrands, the learners could practice developing their own understanding and sharing it to the others.
Let's see some example of this chart. So the first one is oral language. So when we say oral, meaning to say orally speak or vocally spoken, just like what I am doing right now. This is an example of a oral language. So the skills that is being applied here is, of course, speaking, because it is orally spoken, and at the same time listening also, just like what we are doing right now. I am speaking and you are listening. The next is phonological awareness. When we say phono, meaning sounds, meaning to say the skills that is being applied here is listening only, because when we say sounds, we can just hear it. We cannot read the sounds, we cannot write the sounds, just only hear. So the skills that is being used is listening only. Next is book and print knowledge. So the skills that is being applied here is reading, because books and print knowledge are designed for reading. Okay, let's move on to the last components. So the last components is the holistic assessment. So what is assessment, by the way? Okay, assessment is an important aspect of teaching and learning, as it helps the teachers in order to gauge their students' learning. Kumbaga, it serves as a monitoring to measure or sukatin of how far or if the learners had a progress of their learning. And when we say holistic, it means whole, overall, or pangkalahatan. Example, after the discussion, the teacher is giving a quiz. With the result of the given quiz by the learners, the teachers can provide a feedback if the learners has something learned from that given discussion. With that, if the learner's score is low, the teachers can think or apply another way of teaching that is more suitable for the learners, for them to learn. This is the 5 characteristics of effective assessment. Number 1, proximity to actual language use and performance. So, the assessment procedure should be based on activities that uses actual language and performance. So, as a teachers, we should give them activities wherein they could share their ideas and express their feelings either orally or in a written activity. For example, group your students and then give them a selection to read. And then each of them should give their individual ideas to their group. So this activity is an example of actual performance which the learners can develop their actual skills by interacting with their group mates. Number 2 is holistic view of language. As language skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing are not purely in isolation, assessment strategies should reflect their integrative nature. These approaches should also take into consideration the holistic nature of the learners as well as in terms of their academic, social, and physical context. So, the example activities in holistic view of language is the reflection on how important English language to the students, and then point of view of certain topics, kumbaga overall idea sa isa ka lesson. Number 3, integrative view of learning. So, as a teacher, we should not just look into one side skill of our learners because every learners have their different way in terms of learning. For example, a learner is not good in writing but good in reading. So, we should find another way or techniques in order for our learners to emerge and show their skills. Number 4, developmental appropriateness. So steps must also be taken to ensure that assessment activities is appropriate to the learner's cognitive, social, and academic abilities with their levels. For example, before going through the topic discussion, ask your students first about what do they know about the topic that you will be discussing. At the end of the discussion, you will ask the same question. Kumbaga, by comparing the student's answer from before and after question, you will determine the student's level of development. Kumbaga, kung nabasalayan hibalaan after the discussion. Number 5, multiple referencing. So, assessment developed for learners should have been designed based on various informations about the learners. Again, the assessment should be based on understanding the learner's needs and abilities.